It's an 18th century Moravian built home, one of the earlier houses. It's log framed, plastered inside, clapboarded outside.
Welcome to my midlife crisis.
I don't know what he must have been thinking. It looked to me like it needed just to be knocked down.
Well, I actually told Bob Hansen about the house. I had just passed it for so many times, and there was a sad little sign in front that it was offered by Preservation, North Carolina.
We typically look at ourselves as kind of the dog pound of the real estate market. We end up getting the things that realtors typically don't want to deal with. These are houses that a lot of the realtors would say, oh, that's a tear down. I worked with this house for probably 3+ years trying to find a buyer. The heirs of the Drage family worked with us. We required an option on the property. Basically, we worked through getting an option on the property so that we can advertise it and find a buyer. Once we find a buyer, we purchase it and sell it at the same closing, but put protective covenants on it in between. They wanted to ensure that the house itself was protected, because even though it's zoned residential, someone could have come in and torn the house down and built another residential structure here. We were running out of time. I think they were getting a little bit discouraged, and we hadn't found a buyer. A lot of people come in and looked at the property, and because of the cost of the rehabilitation, had walked away.
I had thought about doing something like this myself, but sort of looked in the windows and decided it was beyond me.
We drove through Bethania. He mentioned that, oh, there's a house here that's been for sale for years, and we slowed down and in fact, I think pulled over and kind of peered in the window and said, this might be kind of interesting to look at.
The family that was selling the house, Mr. and Mrs. Drage, they had both died, and the estate was offering the house. And I think Preservation, North Carolina, I feel is a very important house historically. They don't know exactly when this house was built, but it was built by Michael Hooser, and he died in 1789.
Bethania was the first planned Moravian settlement in North Carolina. It was planned in Europe to function as the first village of the Lord, one of 6 villages here in Moravian Wachovia. Gentry came to visit from across the state. Everybody knew about the Moravian settlements.
Bethania is the only medieval plan farming community south of Pennsylvania.
It was a typical German planned agricultural settlement, and you had town lots that were very specific size. Everybody was given their orchard lots in the back to go farm, as well as their communal farming lots.
The Michael Hooser house was the first home to be built on an orchard claimed from original orchard lots.
Michael Hooser was not a Moravian. He was a refugee who had sought sanctuary in the settlement of Bethania, which meant House of Passage. And during the French and Indian War, lots of people who were set upon with the antagonisms came into Bethania. The Moravians let them in, and because there was such overcrowding there, they decided to found the first planned settlement in the Wachovia tract, which is Bethania, sooner than originally anticipated.
The Hoosers eventually became Moravians, but they were invited to live here. There were a number of outsiders living in Bethania, and it was overcrowding in Bethania, which is now essentially deserted, that started Bethania.
Bethania is encapsulated in a time of people being a community, and it just has a charm that you just don't find in other places. And it used to be, that you were a part of a community, you were a part of a church, you were a part of, your neighbors' lives. And Bethania is that.
Bethania is a mighty nice place to live. This is the land where the sweet water flows and the wild flowers grows, and the birds sing all day long.
You know, having a heart for the community, you can't help but have a heart for the properties too if you really value what Bethania stands for.
Reports came back from the structural engineer and architect, and after a contractor came here and looked at it, and after quizzing them, they generally said, well, this could be $200,000, $300,000 project to bring this house back, at which point I thought, boy, it's going to be really expensive, or could be really expensive. And so at that point I said, well, my upper limit's going to be $80,000. I'll offer that. I don't think they'll accept it. It's too low, but that's what I think I can do. And that's exactly what I offered. And in the space of a few hours, the deal was sealed. There's so much spirit and soul and living that has gone in the house, and to be part of that and to preserve it, while I'm here for the time that I have, I think it's important work.
Some people call me the log whisperer. I'm a third-generation log builder. Me, my father, my grandfather, great uncles. I feel like that if I can restore an old building or an old house for future generations, it's something important. The early builders really knew how to pick the quality of the wood, by the growth rings. The great bulk of them would be a virgin heart pine, which is very durable. It has a high rosin content. The house has a lot of great features. The old mortise and peg panel doors, the Greek Revival window trim that was added in the 1800s. It was obviously remodeled in the early 1800s. The pitch of the roof was obviously changed at some point because the rafters was mortise and peg together, and it's void of the pegs now. In other words, the holes didn't line up when the roof was changed. When I get to working, I like to feel like I knew the people that lived here. Maybe think about all the good times and the bad times and the Christmases and Thanksgivings and just all the living that went on here. As with any old house, it holds a lot of mysteries. There's a good possibility that the house, like most of the early houses in Bethania, had the central chimney in the middle of the house, and then lifestyles tend to change, and they moved the fireplace and chimneys to the exterior walls, tucked the center ones down. This house has a nice cellar under it. Maybe that's when the cellar was added, when the center chimney came out. One of the most important things with any form of construction is the footings and the roof, and really everything in between don't make any difference if those two components isn't good. Pretty much they just dug down to where the ground was solid, used native fieldstone, stacked them back with maybe a sort of a clay mixture. There wasn't any mortar, Portland cement. So by today's standards, it would be inadequate to support the weight of a log building. Over the course of time and the weight, you'll see a lot of settling. The doors don't work quite as well, and so the foundation certainly needs some attention.
If you took it back and did a true restoration, then you would be changing the pitch of the roof. You'd be bringing it back down to a story and a half potentially. You'd be living without a bathroom. You'd be living without a kitchen. You'd be living without heating and cooling, or without central heating and cooling. When you're doing a tax credit project, they want you to respect the changes, the significant changes in the different periods of time. And the Greek Revival time period was a very significant change to this house. It exemplifies the wealth of the community during that time period. There were a lot of rehabilitations or changes to structures during that time period. So we would really like to see Bob respect the Greek Revival time period.
So we think we had a door here.
Yep.
The building holds a lot of its stories. I mean, it has a lot of evidence to reveal, and it will reveal its secrets. The question is, you know, how much of this you really have to absolutely know, because the 1840 period is significant and wonderful, absolutely wonderful, and intact. And the earlier story of the building's presence here is worthy of note, but it's not going to be the determining factor. It clearly started out as a log house, maybe a story and a half. It's possible that the first period could be a 1780s house, post-American Revolution, period of prosperity. If you take the American Revolution out, you've got to push it back into the early 1770s, and it's possible.
There's just a big dead spot in construction during that point. I mean, there wasn't a lot of construction going on for, 10 years or so. You see a sort of a real lull in construction just because the people still recovering from the war.
We start out with a very German Flakuchen house 3-room plan.
Sure.
Kitchen hall, which is here, and then a parlor in the front, and a bedroom in the back.
Oh, okay.
Generally what it would be. Flakuchen, hall kitchen, which is typical German, anchoring on a central chimney. There's certainly not 2 end chimneys at period 1 of this house. I don't know that there wasn't a period of time where it wasn't exposed log on the outside. Could have been 9 months, could have been 2 years. It depends on when the buildings are built. Certainly after the American Revolution and even and before, they're covering these log buildings with riven boards or clapboarding of different kinds. Now, clearly, there's a big change that occurs in this house, and that falls in line with what we're seeing going on in Bethania, with a number of houses being invested in. In the 40s and the 50s, before the Civil War, it's a period of prosperity, and a lot of these houses are Anglified or Greeked, basically. And they get away from the center chimney plan, this Flakuchen house 3-room plan, and they try to make them look like Greek Revival English houses, where symmetry is important. They flatten the roofs out, they move the chimneys out to the end, they try to make it look like they got a center door. They move the door from the side, which had been that hall plan, and then they move it into the middle, and they put 2 windows on either side, put a Greek portico on the front, whatever, and they try to make these things look like Greek houses. And that's when it really takes a whole new presentation. And it isn't some little German house at that point. It's a Southern Greek Revival, front portico, symmetrical, low roof profile, in chimney house. And it's just, you know,
it's a modern house.
It's a modern house. We have another change that occurs when they bring up the kitchen and they attach it to the end of the building. And that's the third campaign. That's part of the charm of an old house, of course, is that it has personality. And like anything, it's unique. There's only one of it. And it has all of these stories, all these wear patterns, and all of these things that are going on with it that mean that it has been a living, using, wonderful, you know, birthing, dying, you know, everything going on in these houses. It's fabulous. And it just radiates, and you can't pick that up in a new house. You just, you know, it takes age. It just takes 160 years to do that. And this house is just wonderful. You know, it has all that radiance to it. I love it.
You try and maintain and protect as much of the original fabric as you can, because there may be information later on that someone will come along and find there, and you didn't need to destroy it, so it could be left, and you protect as much of the history as you can that way too.
We always say that preservation is the ultimate in recycling, but now it's the ultimate in green building. This is a green building because you're not wasting. It's here. It's here. It's better than a new construction green building. Rehabilitations actually use more labor, so they're better for the economy too, because they're using more people. They're not necessarily using more material, but they're using more people.
I was expecting to find a house that was going to be carried back to the 18th century, but this is in such good shape and it's such a good example of Greek revival that we've decided that that's the period in time that it should go back to. Everything is here, and I think we can even take moldings down to the original paint, and you can see the original paint schemes, and it's going to be a good example of Greek revival. There is a section of built-in early banister on the first floor, and it's a great discovery that Bill made. He pulled off the knotty pine covering on it. It's just, you know, a really eye-catching thing. Well, what I like about it most of all is the color of it. Even though the red's not the original paint, it makes it stand out, and then you have your white spindles. It's almost a typical design of a porch post. It's got a chamfered corner with a limestone cut on it, and this is exceptionally heavy, which would probably mean a later period in time. And these spindles are rived out with a draw knife, and kind of remind me of spindles in a Windsor chair. In the attic, we have a wide pine floor, and the first thing you probably notice are the type of nails that hold the floor down, and they're the big, what we call a rose head. It's a hand wrought nail that is blacksmith made, and it's struck about 4 times on the head, and it gives it sort of a petal shape, and that's where the rose head part comes from. And some of the boards upstairs are turned over, and you can see the actual straight pit sawed marks on it, which tells you that it's before the circular saw, and that's before 1840s. But if you put the wrought nail with the pit sawed and the width, then you come up with the 18th century for the floorboards in the attic. The original time frame for the story and a half, the first period for this house was probably 1760 to 1780 or 90. This is the top log that was cut out for the ceiling rafters, and instead of hewing out a new log for that, they just moved the story and a half top log up, and they added 5 new logs, which aren't whitewashed, and inserted them and made this into a full 2-story log cabin. In a log house, you have to pay attention to the chinking between the logs and seal off all the cracks that you can. On the outside, we can take off some of the siding, and what's brittle and breaks, we can replace with siding and use period type nails, and you wouldn't know the difference. If someone's going to spend a lot of money to restore a house, they probably want to live in it. And if you're not going to seal off all the cracks and in some way update your windows, then you're going to have a nicely restored house that nobody wants to live in, or no one will want to buy from you in the future. So you have to look after your customers' concerns.
The way I'm going to finance this is by transferring the equity from my home in Greensboro to this particular project. Right now, what I'm doing is going in very seriously into my home equity line, and you know, within a couple of months, that will be potentially maxed out, and then there'll be less equity to transfer from my house in Greensboro if I can sell it, given the present state of the market. So, yes, it does get scary sometimes.
This is an ash, Fraxinus americana. The ash is an indigenous tree here. Yeah, it's interesting. It's from a health standpoint, it's a healthy tree. From a structural standpoint, it's pretty weak. But it's gotten beaten up, it's responded, it's compartmented that injury. New wood forms after the injury. That's how you end up with hollow trees, because the wood that was injured at the time is protected by the new wood that forms later after an injury. So that's how you end up with hollows. You know, in the olden days, they probably would go up and take out a broken limb, but you know, it's more finding a compromise for man-made structures and the trees, and you know, saving the tree in those days meant they just didn't cut them down. So, because they had a lot of trees, you know, and unlike now, you know, where we come in, bulldoze trees down and then plant more ornamentals in their place.
This was our bus stop tree. All the kids in Bethania met here every morning and discussed, you know, what was going on, goofed off, fooled around, chopped it, kicked it, stomped it. Everything happened around the tree here. This was the hub of our daily life, our weekly life going to school. There was fooling around of all sorts by the tree, and it carried on not only to catching the bus, but it was the rendezvous point for other things. We won't go into other things, but everyone knew where the bus stop tree was.
At the back of the house, there's a one-story addition on the house, and one theory is that this was the original cookhouse or kitchen for the house, when the kitchens were usually kept detached from the house to keep fires from spreading. They think the building was probably brought up to the two-story house sometime in the 19th century. I'm drawing some plans. Bob is going to need to build an addition on the back to get a modern bathroom, and it's better probably to do this in an addition than to try to work with the house and have to cut into the walls. He'll just carry that line a little bit further back. So it will pretty much look the same when he's through, just a bit bigger.
The purchase price for the property was $80,000. $50,000 of that was drawn out of my home equity line. Since then, I've taken another $50,000 loan, and just last week I took my last $50,000 loan out of my home equity line. So, you know, by mid-April, I'm anticipating that I'll be $150,000 into the project. That includes the purchase and the restoration work.
¿Ya? No nos despegues. No, nunca, no más pegamento. Ya, así. No nos despegues de ahí. Suave, suave, suave. Despacio.
This was found up in the attic under the floorboards. It was blown into a mold, and you can see the broken pontile on the bottom. It's got FK embossed on it. It may have been like a little drug bottle or an ink bottle, late 18th century or maybe into the 1820 period. And it's really the earliest bottle that we found here.
I mean, I think there is this kind of layer of science and archaeology, anthropology that, you know, makes the whole project interesting. You know, in some ways, I suppose it's the house owns the people who live here.
Abajo, como anduve escarbando, encontré huesos y pedazos como de platos de vidrio. Bueno, pues a mí me llama la atención lo antiguo. La verdad, a mí me gustaría hacer una casa, pero de tabique.
The next phase will be to put the roof on the house. So we're making excellent progress. There haven't been any terrible surprises. The foundation is complete. The addition is up and enclosed, and they're working on the porch roof even as we speak. So it really is going much better than I originally expected. And And in fact, at the end of the month, my house in Greensboro will go on the market. So fingers crossed I'll have as much good fortune there as I've had here so far.
Sort of a surprise to me, well, I married a Hauser, and that's the pronunciation in Forsyth County of H-A-U-S-E-R. Her family descends, of course, all the Hausers in Forsyth County descend to Bethania, which is where they originally settled. And my wife, it turns out, is like the 8th generation granddaughter of Michael Hauser, which is kind of really funny since now I'm working on his house.
Most of the Moravian houses have just extremely strong roof structures and roof subframing that's just very Germanic when you look at them. Before, rafters that was either sawed or hewed, that was always in white oak for strength.
I'm on my last $25,000, and so in a week or so we'll be pausing and until I sell my house in Greensboro, at which point in time then when I get my finances together, we can resume work.
We're in a really good place where we have the roof is taken care of, so
right.
And we're fixing the drainage, and so if we get the water running away from the house, and if we've got our foundation fixed, we're in a good place where everything stays tight, nothing gets hurt. We could pick it right back up again.
I'm a professor at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, in theater. I teach theater history. I found this house 11 years ago. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was driving around. There was a showing sign on the side of the road. I pulled over, walked in the front door, and said, I could live here. This was a brand new house. It had just been finished. When I first moved to Greensboro, this was a wooded area surrounding a lake, and it was a wonderful area to bike into, and now it's become urban sprawl. Every night when I come home from Bethania, I plop down in my easy chair here and look around the house. I wonder, what have I gotten into? Just what the hell am I doing? I've been working on this for months, but in some ways I feel like I've lived my entire life here in terms of the welcome I've received from the people and what I've found out about the town, the folks here. So that's all wonderful.
You got a big line formed back there behind you.
July 4th, this week I signed a contingency contract on my home in Greensboro. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. If I'm lucky, at the end of August, I'll be able to move to Bethania and we'll be able to transfer whatever equity I still have in my house in Greensboro to the restoration project. I found Wally 2 days ago underneath the house. Neighbor came over and said, you've got a house guest, and I said, oh my God, not more cats. And he said, no, there's a little abandoned dog that's taken up residence under the house. And sure enough, there was this frightened, dirty, emaciated, hungry, starving little puppy. And it took me an hour and a half to kind of lure him out with water and with kibbles, right? Your favorite kibbles. And I thought he was gonna bite me and attack because he had a whole repertoire of growls and snorts, and he was pretty fierce. And I put my hands on him, and he melted, and we bonded, didn't we? Didn't we? You said, I found my master, and I said, I found my best friend. It's moving day in Greensboro. Very fortunately, I was able to sell my house 3 weeks ago. A couple of days from now, we'll be closing. I've spent 3 weeks emptying the house of all of the small possessions, and now 2 men in a truck are here to take the big appliances and furniture pieces. I have stuff in storage. I've persuaded friends to take in orphan pieces, and it's been a real challenge and kind of a delight, winnowing things down. My objective is, when I die, to be like Mother Teresa, to have the clothes I'm wearing and an extra pair of sandals. The day they became too exuberant and took down the plaster in the front rooms. And, nearly decimated the original wallpaper. You can't blame them for their desire to get back on the job, but on the other hand, maybe a little more care, a little more deliberateness, and maybe a little better communication on my part as well. It was one of those moments of tension and drama, where I had one set of expectations and then came on the site and discovered that something else had occurred, and that, stepping back and redoing it would, lose time and lose money in the process, and so it was 2 days of disappointment.
That is paper. Oh, that doesn't even match up with this, really, does it? What does it say? You fool. So this is probably a parlor or living room or a formal area. We have a layer of paint, and it's on top of a layer of wallpaper, and there's part of the name of the maker or manufacturer of the wallpaper. 2 layers of paper were made by the same company, and if you look that up, you could probably tell exactly when this paper was produced. This is the earlier mark, and this is the later mark, produced under Fleck. And then we have another layer of wallpaper, which is this print, and that's this layer right here. And then underneath it, we have this layer of wallpaper, which is the first layer of wallpaper that was used. If you determine that this is the original covering for the wall, and you wanted to go back with it, then the best thing you would probably be able to do is reproduce this pattern and then repaper the whole room. And it would really be beautiful. We're going to take the siding off the house. After removing the siding on the front of the house, we found initials carved into the logs, and also the date of 1845, which is within the period of time that we think the Greek Revival renovation took place. We pull this furring strip back, and the only nail holes that we find on the original logs are the nail holes that hold this furring strip on that was put on probably in the 1820s to the 1850 period, which indicates that the first period house had no siding on it.
I think one of the really exciting things about this project has been the backyard archaeology work that I've been able to do. I spent 2-3 days excavating underneath the L and did find some wonderful colonial buttons which kind of date the house. We weren't going to take the siding off of the house, but we did some exploratory removal of the siding. It came off easily. We numbered it, we took it all off, we insulated and re-chinked, and with all of the siding off, we were able to scrape and sand it, prime and paint it, and we're at the point where we're hoping with good weather to put the siding back up in the next couple of weeks. At this particular juncture, I'm about, let's say, $240,000 into the whole project. I paid off one mortgage, but now I have another mortgage almost as large as the one that I paid off. Mike Stout from Preservation, North Carolina said, well, if you were to do all of the work yourself, it would be $50,000. If you were to do some of the work yourself and bring in tradespeople to do some of the more difficult things, $100,000. And if you were to have it all done by someone else, then $150,000 would bring the house back. Well, that's a bunch of hooey. This thing's going to cost me about $250,000, which isn't as high as it could have been. From the very beginning, people were saying, "Oh, it's going to cost you $500,000 to do this," which literally stopped my heart. Some cocoa? We can serve here. That's what we'll do. We'll serve the crisp, okay? When all is said and done, coming out of it with a mortgage and a little money in the bank, and bringing this back to where it is, well, I guess it's money well spent. And now I have to focus on maintaining my health so that in the next 10 to 15 years I can hopefully get the money back that I put into it. There's going to be a shower here. There'll be a short wall. The whole thing will be tiled, and then right over here adjacent to it will be one of those old-fashioned claw-footed steel soaking tubs. I'm not having second thoughts about the project, but it's been over a year, and there are certainly days when the journey's great, but when am I going to get to that destination?
I know that people love these old houses and that, but it just seems like it can be such a money pit. I don't know, it's a tough house to plumb and wire and heat, and, you know, the degree of difficulty is there. Different elevations, running into duck. Can't hardly get from one piece of the house to the next without, you know, just slithering like a snake. And it's, then you need fall from one point to another, and you can't achieve that here. I mean, you can, but we've got to do it in a roundabout way. And then we got the problem of being in a position where we need to get upstairs, and we're going into an attic scenario. I just don't believe that that'll be accepted, so we're still checking into that. But right now, there's nowhere else to go without getting into the logs, and, you know, we're not doing that.
Perfect.
When I looked at all the stuff that needed to be done over here in the first place, I said I'd put a match to it.
This house was probably wired in the early 1920s. There was not much usage of electricity back then. People thought if they had a light bulb and possibly something to plug in, maybe a washing machine, that was about it, and that was all they needed at the time. And as time went on, they said, well, we'll have some more lights in another room, and they added on, and sometimes it got really dangerous. The challenges in an old house is such as logs and things that are trying to be left exposed there. The wiring, we try to hide it or it won't be visible, because that will take away from the historic value of the house.
See, if we keep the plumbing where it is,
yeah,
I'll have to make the sink base cabinet 3 inches larger.
Okay. Well, see, now this is all dusty and dirty, but that's close enough.
Yeah, that has a little bit more brown to it, but I still think it works.
Yeah.
First, we're hanging the drywall, the plasterboard, and then we'd be going all over it with the plaster mud and the brush to make it look like it did 250 years ago. A job like this, the difference is nothing's in square, and the ceilings are not 8 foot tall like most houses, and the doorways are short. You seen the problem we had bringing drywall up from the first floor to the second floor, and when we had the drywall delivered, usually we can take a window out and get the drywall delivered to the window, but these windows are too small. I have my son working with me. I have my son-in-law working with me and his brother, and I have another guy working that's Dad's one that I used to work for back in the 60s. If you mess with us, you got to fight the whole tribe, but if you leave us alone, we'll kill one another.
Bethania is not just made by the clapboard on these houses, or by the roofs, or by the porch, or by the stone walk. A large part of the aspect of Bethania is you have these people, these families, who have been here for generation after generation after generation. What happens is people come back from all over the southeast, and they go out there and they wash their ancestors' gravestones. And then members of the church go up and put flowers out on the old graves that are so many generations back. Nobody cleans them anymore.
You walk up between those ancient cedars and you go up to God's Acre and you go in there and it's just gorgeous and it's misty. The sun's coming up over the hill and all the flowers are real. And I always think, all these people in this graveyard knew our house. They knew this place. They've been here before. And they made Bethania so much of what it is now. In such a short time, 200 years later, here we are doing the same thing they were doing.
We still have to discover the original paints, match the colors, paint them in When the sheetrock's finished, a massive cleanup, maybe an understatement, and we're going to seal the floors off, maybe apply a little bit of a wax finish over the top. Pretty much it'll be details after that. Hopefully we'll pass a final inspection and Bob Hansen can move in.
We're hoping to be finished by the end of the month, and that's dependent really on the weather and the workmen's schedules, but I think it's going to be pretty darn close to that point in time. The end of April. The end of April is what I'm hoping for. You know, of course, we could be back here at the beginning of May, and I could be saying I'm hoping it's going to be the end of May. I was telling a friend last night, after a year and a half, I'm just worn out. I'm just too exhausted. I'm, too much in debt to be, happy. When I started this project, I kind of naively said that it would take 5 years, and here it is, a year and a half into it, and it's very close to being done. Or at least, major work on the old house is very close to being done. So, yeah, we're ahead of schedule, really. I'm very happy. I'm bipolar. I've become like everyone else in Bethania.
The most obvious places where they did unusual painting, marbling, or graining is on the flat surfaces, like on the flat surface of the column, where these, in the Greek Revival period, these are supposed to simulate marble. We stripped this down or scraped it down, and we have a real unusual color combination in that they're pastel colors. A base coat was put on, and then a top layer was put on, and while the top layer was wet, they added their colors and streaking to make it look like marble, but you can see that the choice of colors really didn't make it realistic. It's more of a folk adaptation of what should be marble.
The floor is 2 inches different from here to there, and I had to lower that cabinet an inch and then raise that one an inch because we got solid surface tops in here and it had to be pretty level. You can't cheat there. I think this is my first red set putting it in. I've been cutting everything and fitting everything so much, so I just took the extra time and cut everything so I don't have to put molding to hide the cracks. And this way, these cabinets were like, they look like they grew with the house. I cut everything just to make it fit and stuff. And I said, man, I'm this far, let me just go the whole distance and stuff. But it is right pretty though.
We exposed the 18th century beams in the kitchen. And so we went back with the 18th century molding that we found. This is actually the original molding that we found, and it has the original paint on it. When we reproduced the molding, we also tried to reproduce the paint as accurately as we could. We added some raw umber to an acrylic sealer and made our 18th century dirt, which is actually artificial dirt. It's actually very clean.
We had discussed celebrating the 250th anniversary of Bethania, and thinking about the earth and the land around Bethania and flowers and plants that grow in this area. I really appreciate the lily of the valley, which is a beautiful, delicate little plant that grows here. And then the black walnut tree. We are here in Black Walnut Bottom here in Bethania, so there are many black walnut trees. This is the little trick here. Hope it.
Into your.
Yeah, I'm just gonna take it off. Actually, we're like this. I got to do some research on mantle pieces, and I love the carved look, but what I really liked was the wood grain, and instead of re-wood graining and then trying to come back, I kind of just painted in the negative space.
This place resembles a big stage set. Some of the painting techniques are kind of faux decorative painting techniques that we use in the theater, and so they're very familiar to me. Yes, there is plastic and different 21st century materials in here, you know, but yeah, the core of this house is pure and authentic, and I hope stays so for a good long while. My contribution will have been, you know, this current renovation and bringing it back to this point, you know, and then my stewardship will be over, and then it will be someone else's responsibility. The house is protected. For me and for any future owner, there are covenants which tie Preservation North Carolina to this property as long as it exists as a nonprofit organization. I think the most, you know, the most surprising thing about the project is how invested I've become in it, you know, intellectually, emotionally, physically, how much I've come to appreciate the community, how much on kind of a dream level I can envision and imagine all of the life that has gone on in this house over the years, and looking forward to my contribution to that kind of ongoing story of the Michael Hooser house. Property. Now, I want you to do a thorough inspection and then come out and tell me how pure it is. We've met a couple of times before, and I'm so pleased that you and River Captain there.
Thank you. The house is just beautiful.
Well, thank you.
Can I come see it? Well, you can't see it. It's in the wall.
I would drive down the road and daily wonder what was going on. It was like watching an ugly bug being born into a beautiful butterfly. You just could not believe that these things were happening, and it's fabulous.
It's beautiful. It's going to be here another 250 years.
Super.